Well, Congressman Peter Roskam is here in the studio tonight. Thanks for joining us to comment on that and some other issues going on. First of all, what do you think about that they approved the sale of the prison?
Well, I agree with Senator Durbin in one aspect, and that is it's not a partisan idea, but I think it's a bad idea. Look, we're a nation that has been reminded on Christmas Day that we're a nation at war. And the notion of somehow bringing Guantanamo Bay prisoners here to the United States, and particularly to Illinois, I think is a bad idea. The proponents of this have not demonstrated that it makes us safer. They haven't demonstrated that it saves us money. And all they can do is really make a jobs creation argument out of it. I'm not sold, and I don't think, frankly, most Illinoisans are either.
What is your solution?
Well, I would keep Guantanamo Bay in place. I wouldn't close it. And I think this is an area that I hope the president backs off of this notion, because ultimately, here's the problem. There is a legal ambiguity about some of these prisoners. Take, for example, the idea of a prisoner that comes on U.S. soil. What is it that the White House hopes a federal court is going to allow them to do? Hold that person into perpetuity? Even President Obama, in a speech that he gave to the National Archives, acknowledged that there's a group of prisoners that can't be tried and shouldn't be released. Well, there's not a category that we have for that. They need to stay in Cuba. I think that's the solution.
It sounds to me that you may be hedging, or should I say doubting our national security, that we could not be able to prevent a target here?
Well, I think that we could provide justice in those instances, but I don't think that it's a wise thing to do. I think it's taking on an unnecessary risk. And look, over a period of time, we've seen what has happened when people's attitudes sort of slacken and change. And there's been a lot of jokes about the sort of incursions into the White House with the party crashers and so forth, but those are ultimately significant. And I think what we've got to do is be reminded of the severity of this attack. It was a system that failed on Christmas Day, and if it hadn't been for a passenger, that plane would have blown up. So my attitude is, let's not take this risk. It's not unnecessary, and it's not ultimately helpful.
What do you think about the indictment coming down against the Nigerian would-be bomber, that it did not include terrorism?
Yeah, I would defer to the U.S. attorneys who ultimately made that decision on what to charge. I don't know the same evidentiary details that they had, but I find that sort of surprising, as you do too, I assume.
Let's talk a little bit about health care and what's going on. We know now that C-SPAN's a little upset because the Democrats are behind closed doors, not opening it up for everyone to see. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's interesting. President Obama made a commitment during the course of his campaign 8 separate times that he wanted to negotiate in public, and have it be transparent and in the president's words, so you knew who was arguing on whose behalf. And I think that resonated across the country. Today, Speaker Pelosi sort of stiff-armed the president on that, and when asked, said, well, there's other commitments that he made. Ultimately, though, this is a question, and the real tension I'm seeing is between the speaker and the president on the issue of taxes, because the president is poised to break a promise that he made, and that is the taxes on people making less than $250,000 a year.
The Cadillac taxes
wouldn't go up, and it's looking like it's going to.
Well, as to say what Speaker Pelosi says, sometimes there's a lot of promises made on the campaign trail that have to, once things are assessed, once they get into the White House. We've seen it before. Read my lips. Remember that?
I remember that.
So here we go again.
Yeah, look, and I think there's no doubt that there's been promises made and promises broken, but at this time and in this season of economic challenge, I think the American public looks at Washington, D.C. and says, hey, wait a minute. We thought you were going to try and drive health care costs down. We thought you were going to increase accessibility. We thought you were going to deal with pre-existing conditions, and instead you're raising our taxes. And I think that ultimately it's a failure, and I think disappointing so far.
And time's going by. He wants a decision by the State of the Union. You think it's going to happen?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Congressman, thank you so much. Happy New Year to you.
Thanks, Micah.